different parts of the southeastern parts of the United States, teaching at seminaries and universities and things like that. And I presented to you just this idea that living in a Christendom, what I call a high Christendom culture and a low Christendom culture. Do you think that your points are these points that Bavinck actually created, which I find fascinating because to me, missiologists have provided a way forward that the rest of Christianity needs to catch up with personally. I think guys like Bavinck, guys like Newbegin, to me, they're the prophets of our time because they're going into religious contexts where there was a different religion that was a majority, where they had to learn how to make Christianity and build a bridge for them to see the faith of Christianity that I think the ministry methods apply in our contemporary culture right now. But do you find that these methods, and maybe you can just speak to this because you may or may not have experience, do you think that those within a Christendom culture resonate with this, or is this such a completely foreign concept that they just reject it outright?
Yeah, so I think these points are universal in terms of what the Bible says about human beings. Now, of course, the way that the magnetic points manifest themselves or show themselves is different according to the different cultures. So that I mean, there are Christian nominal civic religion, even Christianity could still show these magnetic points in a very negative way that isn't to do with the gospel. But I think my observations are, I mean, look, in the UK, there are very few evangelicals. It's hard. We're in a very kind of increasingly post-Christian context where we're trying to get traction. In the States, you still have vast swathes of what you might call high Christianity influence. But increasingly, you've also got parts that are further and further going out to sea. And the question, as I said to you in the pre-show chat, is how do you bridge the gap? If you're content, I suppose, to stay in your pockets and just do what you've always done in the way that you teach, the way that you disciple, then fine. But some of this stuff I'm talking about, like the Isabella Burton book, Strange Rites, it's not simply that there are some people in the US who would call themselves witches or would play with crystals, but this is a whole culture of self-improvement, self-fulfillment, which is ubiquitous across the media. And again, it's a kind of a my big point I'm trying to make, especially as I try and do some work in colleges and seminaries, is to say, even in your kind of Bible belts, you need to be training your leaders, and in fact you need to be training your congregation to be thinking cross-culturally, to be training them cross-culturally. So all of those tools and the influences of people like Newbegin and Bavinck, bring that to the front of the curriculum. It's still crucial. I mean, all the magnetic points is good biblical systematic theology about who God is, who human beings are, what's the problem, what's the solution. But to do it in a way that kind of engages the culture, which is, of course, what the whole issue of contextualization is. It's listening to the culture, as Paul does. I've observed your objects of worship, and increasingly, I think, in the States and in the UK and in the West in general, we need to be doing more of that. My fear, as I said to you, is that the influence of Christianity and just the power that Christianity has still in the US. I know you think it's diminishing, but it's still a massive powerhouse. Will continue. But what you'll have is then you'll have a desert land until you get to people who are completely kind of not disenchanted, remember, differently enchanted. That's a key point. By all kinds of other things. And it's how are you going to, for the sake of mission, for the sake of the lost, how are we going to bridge that gap? And that means we need to think creatively and missiologically without going away from that tethering of a biblically based way of understanding human beings. And I think that's part of the kind of the identity crisis that maybe you're, and so again, some will want to connect, but they'll forget that actually we need to do this on a very solid biblical base. Others will just be so interested in the solid biblical base that they haven't got that kind of missiological passion as Paul. I remember Paul is in Athens. He's not even meant to be there. He's waiting for his friends. He's provoked by idolatry, but he doesn't say, well, I'm just going to leave them to it. I'm just going to wait for my friends and carry on. He goes out and he does what he always does. And that missiological drive for the lost. And that's where I think Bavinck again is wonderful, because he has such a robust theology, But at the end of the day, he talks about meeting in love, and that, that he has this great line where he says, the wounds that the gospel inflicts on the human heart are ones that have been inflicted on me first. And that this idea that our evangelism has to flow from our discipleship. And at the end of the book, it's a bit of a kind of it's a subversive point itself, because it's saying, don't just think of non-Christians as just projects or whatever. It's as we apply the magnetic points to ourselves, the end of 1 John, beloved, keep yourselves from idols. We need to be applying these things, because I know in my life, and in the pressure cooker of the context we're in at the moment, where the world seems crazy, I know that I can be pulled away and look for different connections or different deliverances, or think that God's got it in for me, or God doesn't know what he's doing. So as I apply the magnetic points to my life, I need to be magnetized, and then that will be the source to magnetize others. But I can only be magnetized as I'm stuck to Christ, or Christ is stuck to me. And that's why at the end of the book, a pastor friend of mine said, and he meant this as a compliment, he said, I thought the end of the book was a real anticlimax. I said, what? An anticlimax? He said, yeah, because at the end of the day, we stay magnetized, not by some new technique or some trick, but it's the ordinary means of grace. It's being together with God's people. It's coming under the word. I mean, I love this idea of the local church as being like an army medical tent in the field of battle. And every week, the troops out there in the world, they're tired, they're hungry, they're wounded, they're disorientated. We come together as God's people. We listen to the word, we're fed, we're reorientated, and we're sent out for another week. And then at the end of the week, we do the same thing again. And it's those ordinary means of grace that is how we stay magnetized. And I think that's really important for the church in the West to hear, that this is a difficult situation for us, but those things that we have been given, word and sacrament, being together as God's people, are so crucial in terms of how we kind of, what our mission is. But being is that creativity of the magnetic points like that, is to say, okay, how do we look at the world through new eyes that give us this idea of traction, where we realize that we're all on a level playing field, and do that compare and contrast between Jesus is the one who gives me connection, Jesus is the one who delivers me, Jesus is the one who is in control, but I still am free in that sense. So, the gospel's given me freedom. Jesus is the higher power. He's the way, the truth, and the life. But other people are living out those points in their own ways, and we need to be making connections as we try and expose the ways in which those idols are false. They have feet of clay, and showing how, or they're, as Jeremiah 2 says, they are cisterns, pots that cannot hold water. And we've got the fount of living water. That's the amazing thing. And that's what I think our evangelism and our apologetics and our witness has to be about.